Nomakhosazana Meth has been appointed the new Minister of Employment and Labour. Meth joins President Cyril Ramaphosa's cabinet Government of National Unity. The new minister faces immediate challenges of high unemployment as well as an often volatile labour sector. Joining us is Thulani Tshefuta, who's Nedlac's community constituency head. Mr. Tshefuta, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. So firstly, given the urgency of the unemployment crisis in South Africa, what should be the new Labour Minister's top priorities upon taking office?
Good afternoon and thank you very much, Nhlanhla, and the viewers of Newzroom Afrika. Firstly, we would most certainly welcome the finality on the establishment phase of the Government of National Unity itself, because it was sending a lot of panic locally and abroad. Secondly, in the same vein, we also want to, before we get into the question you're asking, just appreciate the service of the former minister and the deputy minister, former minister Nesi and former deputy minister Muloi. And thirdly, we welcome the retention of the department as the Department of Employment and Labour, as we see that other departments have been affected by some changes in terms of the name and the core mandate that they have to drive. The primary reason we welcome the retention of the department as the Department of Employment and Labour links directly to the question you are asking in terms of the priority of employment. Where we should see that employment is an apex priority for everyone is the fact that there is not a single political party that contested the 2024 national and provincial elections that did not have employment as a priority. And linked to that, the problems, the socio-economic problems that we have in South Africa, relating even to the high unemployment, are problems that to some extent were created by the apartheid state, and therefore the democratic state will have a role to play in undoing that. And therefore, of great importance for the minister and the team now is to make sure that the programs of public employment are elevated to greater heights. And one critical enabling program that is sitting with the Department of Employment and Labour is a program that we saw the department launching in all 9 provinces across the country, reaching up to about 400,000 people or so, if I'm not mistaken, a program that is called the Labour Activation Program. And so the minister and the team and the department as a whole, and the whole of government basically, must coalesce around that program and make sure that it is taken to greater heights in as far as making sure that access to public employment program is actually made easy for those who are targeted. Secondly, public employment programs must have greater reach, which means there is no corner of South Africa that must not be reached by those programs. Thirdly, public employment programs must just be taken to scale. When we talk about public employment programs, we must no longer be talking about hundreds or thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands. We must be talking into millions. That's where the biggest investments must go. And lastly, it is in the public employment programs that we must see greater impact that will also have a knock-on effect on economic activity amongst the poorest and the most rural of people.
Mr. Tshefuta, I do appreciate that background, but I want us to explore a subject that you touched on. I mean, there are worrying statistics with South Africa's unemployment rate at 33%. Are there specific measures that the new Labour Minister can implement to actually create these much-needed jobs, but also reduce unemployment, particularly among young women?
So firstly, the instrument that is sitting in the hands of the minister is to make sure that whilst we talk about creation of more employment, the existing instruments in the Department of Employment and Labour must be utilized like TERS, must be utilized for increased retention of employment, so that we don't create employment whilst we are losing bigger numbers of employment. That should be the starting point. The second point is that for everyone who loses a job in South Africa, they interface with the Department of Employment and Labour through the UIF, the Unemployment Insurance Fund.
Yeah.
And therefore, that labor market intelligence that comes from those people as to which sectors you come from, what were you doing, what are the reasons why you lost the jobs, must be used in return to facilitate entry into sectors of the economy that can actually absorb more. And specifically, this program of the labor activation program that is sitting with the Department of Employment and Labor is one of those programs that can be used to make sure that people are provided with training as one of the interventions, which training must not only end with certification, but success for training must be defined to mean that people acquire the necessary skills but exit training into employment. And employment must mean either public employment programs, it must mean formal employment into the private sector, it must equally mean self-employment. Equally, entrepreneurship should be one of those, even targeting the young women that you are giving focus on, to make sure that they are targeted where they cannot get formal employment, but they are supported to push their entrepreneurial endeavors. And lastly, there is a program that, if implemented to scale in South Africa, it can change the face of youth unemployment. And that is the program of National Youth Service.
Now, unflattering is that South Africa is known for its economic inequality as well. What policies or programs should the new minister prioritize to really address this issue and promote equitable economic growth?
The first is that we must not tire in making sure that we provide the necessary level of certainty that is required by the investors. So we must continue to provide the enabling environment, and part of that enabling environment is what would be policy certainty in some of the factors of the economy. It would be a continuous and affordable provision of water and energy and data and infrastructure so that businesses can thrive. It must be the continuous support through business development support and even availing funding instruments. And we know that the Department of Employment and Labor, through the UIF and the compensation fund, are the second biggest investors after the pension funds into the PIC. And therefore, the investments that the PIC make on the mandate of the UIF must be channeled to sectors of the economy that are labor intensive, sectors of the economy that can promote growth, and sectors of the economy that can create more employment. And therefore, our equation, and there is no other way, our equation must focus, one, on attracting investments and providing the necessary enabling environment. Secondly, those investments must contribute to the growth of the economy. And it is through that growth that we must then, on the backdrop of that growth, that we must then create employment. And we have experiences, by the way, in South Africa, where we have enjoyed growth that has not led to employment, but where we are intentional about investing in sectors of the economy that can grow and sectors of the economy that are labor intensive, we are going to see a knock-on effect between those three variables, being investments, growth, employment.
Mr. Tshefuta, as we begin winding down our conversation, I deliberately mentioned young female South Africans earlier, and the unemployment rate among South African female, or rather women, is alarmingly high at 49.4%. What targeted interventions are needed here to really address this severe issue?
One of the factors that can be done, and it does not need new instruments again, it is the fact that Minister Meth has in her portfolio the Employment Equity Commission. And so employment equity can be used as a tool or as a lever to promote increased absorption of women in the labor market. Secondly, when we talk about increased placement and absorption of women and young women in the labor market, the labor market itself must begin to provide space for women to be supported with things that would ordinarily hold them back from accessing the labor market. One of those is that where women should be accessing employment, they have other responsibilities of looking after children. Employers, the labor market, can actually provide support mechanisms to make sure that children of women that should have been taken care of, such that women are looking after children when they should be at work. Those are provided to make sure that women do actually get equal opportunities. And thirdly, women in South Africa are amongst the hardest workers. And if given the minimum support, they can basically undertake their own initiative and make sure that they use their own initiative through community-based projects and use the backdrop of those, including informal business ventures, to generate income, participate in the economy. And so one of the things that we must avoid in as far as women is concerned is to only want to shift them from what they are ordinarily doing on any ordinary day and say, go and fit into those other sectors of the economy. Yes, that is important. There is no sector of the economy that women cannot participate in. There is no sector of the economy that women cannot lead. There is no sector of the economy that women cannot work in. But there are things that women excel in doing on any other ordinary day. And therefore, our first step must be to support them on that which we call own initiative that women are already taking at household, at community level.
Mr. Tshefuta, we have run out of time, but very quickly, how can Nedlac support the new minister in their efforts to really tackle unemployment and also the inequality question that we also explored?
Nedlac, well, the minister is the executive authority of Nedlac. And we are confident that, and we have all the trust that the minister is going to work very closely with the social partners of Nedlac. We can basically say that the minister has come through the ranks because she has served in all spheres of government. She was a speaker in a local municipality. She was an executive mayor in a district municipality in OR Tambo. She was a member of the executive council in a provincial government. And now she is a minister in a national government. And in all those phases, she has basically worked closely with social partners and other stakeholders. And now we are saying that she is getting into a Nedlac that is already beginning to reposition itself as the apex platform for social dialogue and using social dialogue amongst social partners to provide solutions to the socio-economic challenges that South Africa is confronted with. And we believe that the speeding up of the Amendment Act of Nedlac can be one of those enabling factors to make sure that Nedlac succeeds in its mandate.
Thank you so much for your time. That's Mr. Thulani Tshefuta sharing his insights on the appointment of Nomakhosazana Meth as the new Minister of Employment and Labour. He's been giving us Nedlac's perspective on this.